Hello and welcome to this interview. I am joined by Callum Smiles. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you work for Rebel News UK.
Yes.
So tell me a bit about that. How did you get that gig? What's your background and how are you finding it?
Well, firstly, absolutely love it. I used to want to be a professional rugby player, but I'd probably say this is the best job in the world. So I got into it because I used to be an actor, and then obviously the pandemic came about. Oh, sorry, am I allowed to do that? I don't want to get you in trouble. And all the casting directors, they're like, right, the big casting directors were saying, if you're not vaccinated, don't even bother applying for an audition. You're not going to get it. So as soon as the big ones did it, the little ones followed suit. I had an old cast director I used to work with basically said, it's people like you that are doing all this. So I was like, right, acting's done.
So you're unvaccinated to this day?
Yeah,
As am I. Proudly.
Best decision I ever made.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
if I can go further back, I'd have stopped my mum doing my childhood ones. But there's a story for
Right,
another day.
okay.
Again, I don't want to get... It's annoying, isn't it? It's all these things you want to say online, but it's like, oh, what can't you say? So I was like, I've always had an interest in politics, back when I actually used to believe in political systems. But I didn't like how we can't talk about these things just frankly. And I was thinking about that. I thought, all right, so I'm going to start my own channel because I love Stephen Crowder's work. Big fan of his stuff. Would watch Louder the Crowder, wanted to do the things he did. So I thought, right, I'm going to set my own channel. I called it Frankly Speaking Politics because I wanted people to speak frankly about political issues. We can agree to disagree, but unfortunately in the modern political climate, within seconds, we're effing and jeffing, we're throwing accusations out there. So I started doing things like that, and I'd like try and put things more in layman's terms, political issues, and explain things more, because again, the BBC will put out a headline, they'll put out half the information, they'll get that anger, the angry energy they want, and that'll be it, be done. And that sort of thing annoyed me, so I'd want to right, here's the rest of the information people are missing out on. I just try and break it down into simple sort of sentences and videos, digestible information. And I thought, right, what does Crowder do? He goes out on the street. He does Change My Mind. Thought, I don't want to completely rip the bloke off, but imitation's the best form of flattery. So I started my own thing called Convince Me Otherwise. So I'd go out on the street. My friend Corey would be there with the camera. Sometimes, cacking his pants because people are getting angry. and I'd take the first one I did was COVID vaccines aren't the answer. Convince me otherwise. And I'd have, some people would come up on the street. They'd be really angry. But one of the things I'd always do is I would never, ever, ever rise to their anger, no matter what they throw. Because at the end of the day, when you're debating, if we're debating just a room, just you and me, okay, we're debating with each other. But if we're out on the street, you're actually debating with everyone else because they see how each person reacts. If one person is calm and collected, they're more likely to give that person the time of day and actually digest what they're saying. But if one person is angry, effing and jeffing, they lose the argument, even if they have the correct information. So I'd always stay sat down. I'd always do it on my own because I want people, especially if they have an opposing view, I want them to feel like they have the upper hand because that's when they go, aha, I'm going to beat him here. I'll go in and argue. And some people that they do that, and then I'd respond with something, and I'd always have some information with me, like my sources, that they could have a look at there and then. And it was amazing to see the amount of people. Some people would be, so I never knew that. Or after they'd get their rant out the way, 2-5 minutes, and then once that energy's been expelled, they calm down, and then they want to talk. And it's amazing. We were, Nazarene Veronica, she did that. She's on that unvaccinated. Well, we followed them the other evening. Unfortunately, this topic's been shadow banned on YouTube. We've only got a few thousand views on it. But we followed them on the underground, where they do their outreach. And one of the guys the other went, oh, I recognise you. Like, what do you used to do? I went, oh, I did this. And he went, that's it. I saw your video. That was amazing work. It's great how, I was looking at you doing your debating and I learned stuff. And so long story short, that's how I got where I am.
And Rebel News saw it, liked your stuff, like your style, and it's like, come
Well,
on board.
ironically, after all the stuff I did, I once did a video just on distilled water, or more on tap water, and that's when my producer saw me. So literally, of everything I've done, it was on my just little videos. I went, oh, I like him. Do you want a job?
It's funny how things go like that, sliding doors of life. The things that you spend loads and loads of time and energy on something, it gets you nowhere, and then some little throwaway thing that you didn't think anything of blows up, and there's just no rhyme nor reason to it. But it's really interesting. You're basically talking about how the mainstream media both misrepresent things and just outright censorship, and it's left to sort of YouTubers, normal people really, citizen journalists, it's a bit of a trite phrase, but normal people like us really, to actually start telling the truth, because the mainstream media isn't doing it. And I give you a lot of credit, a lot of kudos for going out into the real world and talking to people, a bit like Crowder stuff. I mean, it's great. That's how I was actually first aware of you last year at Davos, where you're actually in the presence of the Dark Lord himself.
Which one?
Yeah, right, yeah. Which one? Sir Anthony Blair.
Yes.
Knight of the Garter. He was actually, he pretty much blanked you, I think, didn't he? That's his style in the street. But still, you went up to him and was trying to ask him questions, put him under a bit of pressure. That was cool, I thought. So how was that from your point of view?
Well, it was interesting.
Davos in general.
Yeah, it's the best way I could describe it. It's like a movie set.
Really?
So, do you know of Mark Devlin? So he put
oh
out.
yeah.
He put
Yeah.
out, I'd love to have a sit down chat with him, but like he put out a video saying, do you know, I used to like Rebel News, but you know they're controlled opposition, because how do people get that close to all these people like in one go? And some people who then like kind of seen that going, yeah, how do you get that close? I was like, have you ever been to Davos? No. All right, there you go. Like, if you really want to know, I suggest you just go out there and see for yourself, because, like I said, it's like a movie set. We the day we got there, it was the day before all the WEF stuff kicked off, their annual conference. So we thought, let's go have a quick look today to just see what the difference is between today and tomorrow. And as we're driving down, they're getting all this stuff, all this infrastructure ready, and there's literally, so where like the main WEF stuff is happening, you have to be invited as a journalist, and they have, the best I can describe it, it looks like an East German checkpoint to get through, and it's literally just there's like a timber watchtower, a timber wall, little walkway that you can get through, and out where we would see people, it's literally just the promenade. It is like the high street in Davos.
Yeah, it's just an open street, right? I mean,
open street where there are some big businesses, even some countries. The one that made me laugh was that Greece literally rented out a building. I was like, hold on, they haven't got a pot to piss in. Like, how can they afford a building in Davos?
They borrowed the money off Germany to do that.
Probably, yeah. And so there are often talks in these other buildings, but also it's just, you know, these people go out on the high street because it's almost like, well, in my opinion anyway, they want to show themselves off. Like they're almost safe there. There's that much security. They put out 5,000 troops to like protect the place. You know, we were joking saying it's because, you know, Avi made that much of an impact last time that they're that scared of him. But yeah, going back to the whole, like the movie set thing. So like use all these like timber structures. They on the end of a church, MSNBC built this extension, literally a timber extension. All these countries and companies, they'd literally put like a new skin on a building for like their like brand or logo, right. And they were doing that at the start of 1 week, and literally on the Friday, you know, half of the guys had gone home. Me and my producer went out back into Davos to have a look, and they're taking it all down. It's literally that much of a movie set. And the ironic thing is you know, they were preaching about sustainability, yet these buildings last a week.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? I mean, I worked in and around Westminster for quite a while, a few years, and I found it a bit surprising that unless you're the Prime Minister or one of the senior Secretaries of State, if you're not that, then you just walk to the Palace of Westminster, to the Houses of Parliament. So if you just hang around long enough outside at Westminster, you'll just see the leader of the opposition, the leader of the SNP, just walking along, just strolling along without any bodyguards or anything. So it doesn't surprise me that if you were just waited around long enough, you would just see somebody like Tony Blair just walking, or Greta Thunberg, or someone, anyone really, just walking along to get to. They're a normal person. They're still a human being that has to physically get there.
Or are they?
Yeah, right. Or are they? Are they not? Are they not lizard people? Interdimensional lizards, I should say more accurately. Yeah. No. Well, I wanted to ask you then, just your thoughts and feelings on, in the most general sense of like the UN and WEF. I mean, what the hell do you think's going on there? Why would a organisation like WEF be so seemingly so unbelievably powerful to be able to sort of, even in their own words, sort of infiltrate cabinets all over the world and have people like Tony Blair who sort of set the tone, set policy, even though they're not in government?
My prediction is he's the next leader of the WEF as well.
You think so?
That's my prediction.
He is extremely ambitious in the worst sense. Tony Blair always has been, really, I think. But why is it? People, defenders of it, try and say, oh, it's only a small economic forum type thing. Like people are allowed to get together and have conversations. There's no problem with that. But obviously, when you look at it, if you're honest, they're sort of wielding unnatural amounts of power, a nexus for billionaires and people that aren't in government, and subverting people that are in government and all that sort of stuff. What's going on in your opinion there? What are we looking at?
Well, it's interesting you say like that, because so that same day that I met Tony Blair, and sorry, going back to what you were saying earlier, he just completely, he wouldn't even look me in the eye.
Right, yeah.
He wouldn't even look me in the eye. And I
classic Blair, just blank that someone's shouting questions at you. Just blank it.
And for anyone who's not seen the video, I even said to him, I said, look, it's okay to be wrong. Making mistakes is, humans are flawed. We make mistakes, but there's a difference between making a mistake and then doubling down when you know it's false. And I made reference to that when I said, you said people who didn't take the jab are stupid. Okay, we've now got the mainstream media, in my opinion, trying to actually just control the damage and almost firefight rather than just openly go, oh yeah, well, you were right. They're now even saying that these COVID vaccines were bad. I was like, we've got proof now that you were wrong. It's like, and it's okay to be wrong if you admit you're wrong when you're wrong. But anyway, so the tangent I was going on there. Minutes before seeing him, I saw Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock.
Right, yeah.
And I think I annoyed a fair few people at BlackRock that week. I'm probably on some form of list. I was on that Emerald Robinson on her show, doing a few interviews when I was out there, and I'd literally, again, just because I do like to poke the bear, I'd go and do my interviews. I'd take my MacBook, I'd put it on this bollard, so it's literally just balancing on there, and I'd stand with BlackRock in the background, and the security come over and go, you can't be here. I'm like, you see that brickwork there? So that's your territory, and this is public. All right? You having a good day?
Okay,
yeah. Okay. You see you later.
Yeah.
And funny enough, that guy actually, he'd walk around, and at one point, I'm doing this interview, and I just see over the corner of the laptop, literally the security guard peer around with his phone, taking pictures. So, either he fancies me or I'm on a list.
Yeah.
But so I saw Larry Fink, and I said to him, I was like, why are you here? Like, why is the
legitimate
CEO...
question, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what is the CEO of BlackRock doing in Davos? Because, if it's for the benefit of the planet, everyone, what's the secret? Why do we have to keep what you say behind closed doors? If it's literally to benefit all of us, it's like me and you having a secret conversation. Right, we need to breathe oxygen, but don't tell the others. But it's for their benefit. Why do we have to keep that away from them? And I said, or are you here for nefarious reasons? Because I've never voted for you. Not only have I never voted for you, I've never seen you on a ballot sheet. So why do you have a say on the World Economic Forum agenda, which ultimately, trickles down into nation states? Again, wouldn't answer a question. I then, because I like to poke the bear, I asked him to play nice, which I don't think he liked. But yeah, I've forgotten the question, but
It's just like what is a WF? Because the answer
yes.
is, well, the answer is nefarious, isn't it? That's the honest answer.
Yeah.
That's the real answer. Because we don't get to see exactly everything that goes on, and it's some sort of hub for the would-be rulers of the world to network with each other, and we're not in the normal people that they want to rule over or do rule over. In a de facto sense, if nothing else.
And you do get some people on the street, and they'll say, oh, so what is bad about the WEF? If it's just rich people getting together and talking about ideas. I was like, well, if that's all it was, that'd be all well and good. But don't they just do that in country clubs or something?
Yeah.
But I was like, but these people, you don't vote for them. They go there, they make decisions that we then have to implement because, well, our governments are. And, I say that our governments are run by these people. And if I just say that on its own, people have every right to just go, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. But I say that because all we've seen in the past few years is it's the World Economic Forum that win every single election. Let's take the 2 candidates in Brazil. Only one of them was a WEF member. Here in the UK, what candidates do we have to actually vote for? Both are WEF members. We have Klaus Schwab even saying, we have infiltrated every single government. And infiltrated has nefarious connotations. It's not just we've got people who work there. Infiltrated implies we've secretly got people in to do what we want without you knowing or even having a say.
Well, it is that thing they try and use it as a slur or a pejorative that you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, they certainly are involved. The WEF, are involved in conspiracy. That's exactly what they're doing. So if you say, for example, in Brazil, but here, you remember when Liz Truss got in, and she obviously wasn't the WEF's choice. So they completely subverted our entire system in order to get Rishi in, who obviously is in their pocket or something, wherever it is.
All you have to do is look at his father-in-law. What company does he own?
There was
Infosys.
a bloodless coup there. There was a coup d'etat there, WEF coup d'etat, in my opinion, to oust Liz Truss, who is pathetic, one of the most pathetic politicians I've ever seen in my life. And nonetheless, she wasn't the right one. She wasn't their pick. And so, I mean, it's as clear as day to me. It just seems obvious, like sort of painfully obvious, what they're doing. And if the mere idea that they're unelected. Because they'll have any billionaire that goes there. Like why would, for example, why would Bill Gates be included in sort of world health policy? Why is he being asked about the next vaccine and what we're going to do about? Well, it's Bill Gates, aren't you just a bureaucrat at the top of a software firm?
I once had someone, and one of them convinced me otherwise, is saying, oh, well, why should I listen to you about health and medicine? I went, well, why does Bill Gates get a say? Yeah. And they go, oh, well, he's he said, no, because by your own logic, he's not a doctor or a scientist. All right, granted, it wouldn't be the craziest idea to think he invented computer viruses because it sells, doesn't it? You then need to sell the antivirus software. That's just an idea. Not saying he did. But it's, again, why do these people get this say?
The thing with the WEF, it wouldn't be that much, or it'd be much less of a problem, shall we say, if they were acting benevolently, if they were doing things that were in the interests of the world.
And in the open.
Or in the open. But they're obviously not doing that. They're obviously malevolent, aren't they? Well, it seems to me it's obvious. For example, if we're going to talk about, or the WHO talk about the World Health Organization, the way most of the world's governments, not all of them by any means, but most of the world's governments were sort of in lockstep immediately when it came to the COVID thing and the different policies of lockdown and how they're going to sort of force vaccinations on people and all that sort of thing. And you saw that sort of immediately from Australia to America, some governments weren't obviously involved. They weren't invited to the table in all sorts of ways. And actually, I think Britain, you could say, wasn't one of the most hardline. And Sweden's a good example where they didn't go along with it as hard as other places. But countries across the entire world were sort of all immediately had very, very, very similar policies. sort of anti-freedom policies. To me, anyway, the lockdowns are sort of a completely unprecedented loss of freedom, a type of house arrest for a mostly healthy nation, and using a sort of a type of Operation Fear to just make people afraid. I mean, what a despicable, terrible thing, and completely unprecedented. I said it before somewhere that even during the Black Death of the 14th century, the plague, they didn't lock down whole nations. There might be small pockets, small towns, villages or hamlets they might effectively do a quarantine on. But they didn't do it to the whole country. It's madness, and we're sort of just moving on from that now, and there's no question, it seems, that someone like Boris or Matt Hancock will be held to account in any way. To me, it's crazy. I don't know what's your opinion on this, that someone like Matt Hancock won't face prosecution for crimes against the people or anything.
Well, annoyingly, with those lockdowns as well, it happened on my birthday. So when come the next year, that was 2 birthdays I missed out on the pub. But
despicable.
But wait, have you ever heard of the term seeding and boiling the frog?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever read Laura Dodsworth's book, A State of Fear. Interesting book. But going back to why these people aren't facing prosecution, it's because people, and I think it's the same with the, and we can talk about this soon if you want, like the normalisation of paedophilia here. I was going to say here in the UK. No, actually, just in the West. People.
Just the West, though. Quite a lot of other countries in the world aren't being bombarded by it. Interestingly,
yeah. So, like a lot of these ideas that they were drip fed. So by the time to people, anyone who doesn't understand the whole seeding and boiling the frog, the seed gets planted, in someone's mind. Take for example when they said these vaccines are just for the vulnerable, there will not be for children. Okay, the whole idea of linking vaccines and children, that's already put in the head. Now, from day one, if they've gone, okay, we're gonna these new jabs that okay, next, very few people are dying with, not necessarily even from COVID. If they just said, oh, these are gonna go in kids, most people go, absolutely not. But the whole idea of they go, okay, these are just for adults, just for the vulnerable, not for kids, and then later on they go, okay, we're gonna maybe look at vulnerable children because we want to protect them. Okay, it's just going to be an option for children. Okay, now some kids, you can have playtime on your own because you can't be with the vaccinated children. But by that point, lots of people, they've become desensitized to it. So that's where the whole term boiling the frog comes in. You throw a frog in a pan of hot water, it'll jump out. You slowly boil it from cold water, it's cooked before it even knows it's in danger. So the whole, like the Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson, all these people not facing prosecution or even just answering for what they've done.
Even that.
People have become desensitized to it.
It's mad, isn't it? Because I remember when it first came out, or say first came out, when they were first saying tens of thousands of people in Wuhan have died. My reaction to that was, oh, well, that's obviously, if that's true, obviously that's terrible. I would like to just see some mass graves, though, just to make sure it's definitely. Never saw any footage of that, so immediately I was suspicious. And anyway, by the time they were starting talking about mandatory vaccines for all sorts of different people, I'd made the decision that I'm just simply not going to do that. If it comes to the point where, and lots of people, mad people, a few people on Twitter, if it came to the point where they were going to come knock your door down, force you physically, strap you to a gurney and force it into your arm. And some people on Twitter and things were advocating for that.
Not just on Twitter.
In my mind,
TV presenters were
right,
doing
yeah. Madness. In my mind, I was like, well, that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to break down my door, a couple of burly guys bigger than me, physically strap me to a gurney, and that's the only way you're getting that in my arm. And I was prepared for that. If it means I can't go on holiday ever again, if I can't go on the train ever again, if I can't get 90% of jobs, well, so be it. I will die penniless and hungry on the street before I take that jab against my will. As simple as that. And I hope it's the case, that they realised that quite a lot of people felt that way. I mean, yeah, you're unjabbed to this day, I take it. Yeah,
I would have sooner rather died fighting for what I believe in than die of myocarditis.
Good. All right, yeah. Good for you. No, bloody good for you. Absolutely. A few more of us would have gone a long way. But I think there were quite a lot of people. That didn't
And I
take
think
it unless you were
interestingly,
forced to.
I've spoken to some people. I think it's actually, I think it's recruited a lot of religious people. So I was a staunch atheist, even even around the start of the COVID stuff, I was a staunch atheist, and then actually, some people started pointing out some biblical references. I started, I thought the whole frankly speaking thing. I've got to be more open-minded about things. And so someone once said, like the human body, like it's got hundreds of muscles, lots of them you don't even know the word for, yet they all have a specific purpose. If take one of those things away, something doesn't work, or doesn't work properly. And like that is the most incredible piece of that's the most incredible piece of design. We are one of the most incredible machines. So I started to become a bit more agnostic, and then I see more and more biblical references, to the point where like, now when I've spoken to other people, I go, yeah, all right, I'm 110% of the belief we were created. There is a creator. I'm 90% like, is it God? 10%, we're just in a Truman Show.
Right, yeah.
But I've spoken to a lot of people where, because of the journey we've been on, these trials and tribulations we've had, lots of people have started to turn to faith.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And because another reason I kind of started to think about was, I was like, all these like American, political commentators that I follow, they're actually all, like 95% of them, like they're all Christian conservatives. I align nearly all my values with them. Yeah, actually, I'm an atheist and they're not. So I started to look into them. I even actually one day messaged Charlie Kirk. I replied to one of his things saying, because he was annoyed about the churches closing. I was like, hi Charlie, I've been thinking about this myself. Despite the fact I'm an atheist, I am livid that the churches have closed, because I understand that some people need this. And surely, a priest is like a ship's captain. He should go down with his ship. And even speaking to Calvin Robinson, he was saying, a priest should be willing to die before he's forced to close his church doors. So I was really annoyed by that, and it got me thinking about the whole, is the church infiltrated? But then he replied saying, do you know what, Callum? Even though you're an atheist, you've got more sense than a lot of Christians out there right now. And yeah, it just started me on this journey where sometimes I now pray for things and I get them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I myself am not Christian. I've described myself before as Christian adjacent, because, well, being a historian, well, I want to be armchair historian at best.
It's a nice armchair you've got.
Thanks. It's absolutely clear. There's no way to deny it. I wouldn't even want to. That Western civilization is born out of Christianity. The Christian values are deeply embedded in the West, deep in its DNA, if you like. Of course, there was even the term "the West" is extremely vague, and obviously existed before Christ. Nonetheless, if you want to if you want to understand a lot of Western history and art and literature, it's completely infused with Christian ideas and iconography. If you go into an art gallery and you look at any sort of medieval art, you need to sort of be familiar with at least the Gospels, if not the Old Testament. I can't really accept that Christ died for all our sins and that he is the same, he is God and things like that. But nonetheless, I'm fascinated by Christian history. I mean, I had a conversation with Calvin at Christmas. Really interesting. I love going to...
He's a lovely bloke as well.
Yeah.
It does, really interesting. It does annoy me when I see some of the stick he gets online, because like people are like, really he's just far right. Firstly, define far right. They never can. But he is a lovely bloke.
And I love going to abbeys and cathedrals. I love walking around an old church. All that sort of thing. It's deep in our tradition, in our heritage. And even though I don't have faith in the central tenets of Christianity. You know, you have to believe that rapture is coming and all that sort of thing, and that Christ sacrificed
Hope.
himself for you. I sort of can't, I don't mess around with this sort of thing. I take it seriously. And so I can't really accept that. But nonetheless, I would call myself Christian adjacent. And there is still absolutely a place for it.
In a similar place.
I think there's absolutely a place for it in our world still, because there is also that criticism that if you, it's not entirely fair to say it about all atheists, but there is that thing, if you're completely empty of any values, then you're open to be subverted quite easily.
Yeah.
You suddenly go along with something because you haven't got a staunch belief, a line in the sand, a moral line in the sand. You haven't got any. So someone can come along and sort of tell you what you think now, and you've not really got a great sort of intellectual or ethical moral defence against it.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, a lot of these, again, yes, it's not the same for all atheists. I was once an atheist, you know, and I've always said, I've always had my beliefs, and, you know, I get suspended from school for doing what I thought was right. You know, I'd fight the bully, like, you know, just because, you know, I had a strong sense of what was right and what was wrong. But I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, actually, who's got he writes some really good web articles on his website, corruptedsystem.com. But we were having this chat about a lot of, when you look at especially like the COVID argument, a lot of the people who actually were for all the government lockdowns and all that, a lot of them, you talk to them, quite often they're atheist. And a lot of the people actually who were standing up to things were of some form of religion. And he says, isn't it funny that, like, these people would almost mock religion, yet they'd often actually just replace religion with government.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, some people believe in God and this, you know, almighty being, and the others go, that's ridiculous. But then they believe in government, this almighty being.
They replace it with another type of dogma. Because that's
Yes.
the problem I think I've got, is dogmatic thought. I'm suspicious of and try to avoid any sort of dogmatic thought. That's why I'm quite a big fan of Socrates, who sort of was against dogmatic thought in all sorts of ways. So I'm not just going to, if I refuse to accept the word of Christ into my heart on a dogmatic level, then, well, I'll also refuse to accept the word of the cabinet or the WEF as dogma. You know, I'm not going to have that. But not everyone's sort of that clear in their mind about it. Because I was a big fan, and still a big fan, of Christopher Hitchens, the late great Christopher Hitchens, and his view on religion. And it's not just Christianity; it would be all religions.
Because he went from atheist to religious, didn't he?
No, he was always famously anti-religious. He wrote a book, God is Not Great, for example, and he would have many debates where he argued against religion in the most general sense.
Oh, it was I thought it was him. It might have been someone else, but there was another famous like speaker who made a similar journey from me. Is in like yes, that staunch anti-religion, like it's, you know, form of evil. To actually, there's actually a lot of good that can be. It's all interpretation, and it's like Calvin was telling me about the Bible. He's like, you know, it's just a guide on how to live well, how to live honestly. I was like, as soon as I kind of thought about it like that, I was like, actually, there's more. Yeah, there is something to this.
It's funny because there's lots of contradictions in it. It sort of advocates all sorts of strange and bizarre things as well, though. I mean, if you ever actually read the Gospels or the Old Testament, it's quite a I would say it's a sort of bizarre book in all sorts of ways.
And maybe when Jesus turned all that bread and fish into all that amount, maybe that will set the precedent for toxic GMO foods. But,
right, yeah, maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's just part of our history and heritage and culture. And I like being a history nerd. I just find it fascinating. But I guess if we could get back slightly to sort of more modern day issues, I've seen you've done a bit about sort of the 15-minute city, or sometimes the 20-minute city, and how that seems to be, again, coming down from, dictated to us from up on high, it seems, from beyond even our national government somehow, and that it's I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but it's socialistic not socialism, but there's some sort of leftist grand plan there to keep people what are we looking at with 15-minute cities? What do you think is actually going on there? What's the motivation behind the people doing it? What's their ultimate aim, do you think?
Well, every year is 1984.
Yeah.
No, so it's interestingly...
It is Orwellian, though. It's actually beyond what Orwell wrote in 1984. It's sort of beyond that.
I part of me even thinks that even he would, like, if he was around now, he'd go, "Oh, I sold this short."
Yeah. I
I
go
thought
far
mine
enough.
was wacky, but this is just something else. When we were in Thetford, so we went to a town meeting, and there's a Conservative councillor there, Lana, I forget her surname, I think it begins with H. Anyway, she was talking about how, well, when I came up with this idea, and someone else on the stage, they had some of the councillors. So there was a Conservative councillor, a Labour, the head of paid services, and the mayor of Thetford. On the other side, it was the people who kind of staunchly opposed this. You may have seen their initial kind of town hall meeting where they didn't have long, but basically they were like, right, we want a longer one. We want to actually hear what your plans are.
That was where you went, right? You attended that.
So we
right?
went to the second
yeah,
one.
I've seen some of that. Yeah.
And the woman the Conservative councillor who came up with this, she was saying, when I came up with this idea, and someone on the people who wanted this meeting to happen, he said, "Isn't it funny, that this unique idea of yours, all these towns and cities across the world have come up with the exact same unique idea as you." So I think the 15-minute city idea is actually, we use the term waking up a lot of people. Like I've spoken to even a lot of people who unfortunately fell for the vaccine stuff. They're seeing this and they're going, "Ooh, right. Okay, still not everyone will admit we were right on the jabs, but there's a good portion now that go, you're right on that. You were talking about this, or rather, what you're saying now was similar to kind of what you were saying then, and you were right then. Yeah, this doesn't sit right with me." And we're seeing a lot of people now actually wake up to the idea of what these 15-minute cities are, because they're totalitarian, they're authoritarian, and some people, when these ideas are put out there, they're always put out there as a form of good. This is for your benefit, and then in the small print, it's, "We're going to fine you into poverty if you go against us." And they had a microphone for people to ask the people questions at Thetford. And okay, yeah, I'm there to report on things, but I was like, actually, whilst I'm here, I've got a question myself. And part of it, I said, the fine print that when these things are mentioned, that the people, politicians don't say out loud is, okay, they'll say, yeah, you've still got all these choices, but the bit they don't mention is, here are your choices. Do what we say, or we'll fine you into poverty. And they tried to skirt around the question. They had nothing, but he got a bit of a round of applause, and people were like, yeah, that's never said. They never actually say what the options are.
Well, it's about, freedom of movement. Like these fundamental freedoms, the freedom of expression, that's under attack. The freedom of...
What's that?
Yeah, what was that even? Yeah, some millennials are like...
That's surely conspiracy
Never
theory.
heard of such a thing. The freedom to have... that your own body, that you've got autonomy over your own body. One of the most fundamental things, up there with the freedom of expression. Then the freedom of movement now. I mean, that's what the 15-minute city thing is curtailing a normal person's freedom of movement. It really is sort of dystopian, and that if it's used, it ends up being used, if you're a conspiracy theorist, in conjunction with sort of a social credit system, facial recognition, all these sorts of things. So it seems like the ultimate goal is to really keep people under a very, very tight control, keep them on a very, very short leash, that you're not allowed to move wherever you want, physically, move around wherever you want. You're not allowed to say whatever you want. You're not allowed... we'll decide what you can or can't put in your own body. And if you do anything that... if you try and rebel against that in any way, you'll either go to prison or we'll put you in penury. We'll make you completely broke. I mean, how is that not dystopian? It's not an exaggeration. That vision of the future is completely dystopian. Do you think that is actually from organisations like the WEF or the WHO or whoever? Do you think that really is what they're aiming at? Because it feels like it would be. It is. What do you think?
Well, long story short, yes.
Yeah.
I personally cannot see any other way around this. It's like whichever rabbit hole you go down to, all rabbit holes lead to depopulation. Like they want or controlling a population. What benefit does the expansion of the ULEZ have? What benefit does you can only drive? Each house can only drive 100 times between zones in Oxford a year, or face fines. Like Sadiq Khan will say we need to expand the ULEZ because people are dying because of all these fumes. Well, there was a recent, and I can find it and send it to you if you want. There was a freedom of information request, whereas who has died because of fumes in London? And it turns out it was down as a so not even the morbidity factor. It was a comorbidity. Was the fumes in London? It was one person. I'm pretty sure it was one person. I'll send it to you just so you can fact check it. So they'll outright lie about that, but then they'll go to their climate change conferences in their private jets. I don't know if you remember the one in Glasgow. They had to fly a lot of these planes. So they touched down in Glasgow. The bureaucrats and the millionaires and billionaires will get off, go to their thing where they'll talk about we need to eat bugs, yet they'll have these steaks. Yeah. And then they had to fly the planes 11 miles further to park them. But interesting about the whole eating bugs, so they talk about that at in Davos. So up and down the street, there's all these places, and they do all these free foods. I ate like a king that week. I can see what the appeal is in joining the WEF, because you eat really well. Didn't see a single bug. Right. But I ate some lovely cuts of meat. And
do you know what it puts me in mind of when during the Great Leap Forward, when there was an unbelievable famine in China, the top of the Communist Party still ate like they always did. They still ate like kings, of course.
Yeah.
If you're invited to be in their inner sanctum.
But now we're seeing the likes of Mark Rutte's Dutch government. Mark Rutte, WEF member. They're telling farmers they have to limit their nitrogen emissions. Well, the Netherlands is the second largest agriculture export in the world. If they go hungry, we go hungry.
Yeah, it's mad. Yeah, the attack on farmers is absolutely terrifying.
Communists always go for the source of food first.
Right, yeah.
Because when you control the source of food, you don't need to police people. Because it's just, as the saying goes, you don't bite the hand that feeds you.
It's mad to say you just outright call it communism, yeah. Or this idea of the ultimate goal of depopulation, completely inhuman is, to my mind, is that goal, to just depopulate the world massively. Lots of people, even sort of Elon, lots of sort of normal people. Say he's not normal, but people that haven't had the brain virus of wokeism say there's no need for that. There's no need to depopulate the world massively. That's sort of just genocidal for its own sake. It's really sort of terrifying to me that seems to be their agenda. And they will use quite often the climate change thing. Like you have to be in a 15-minute city because of fumes, because of CO2, because your car puts out too much CO2. Well, I don't know about you. This is my question. How do you feel? What are your thoughts and feelings on this? But I just don't buy that CO2 drives climate change. Just as simple as that. I'll say that. It seems like, well, it is the case that climate will always change. The Earth's climate will always change. It will always be in flux. There's no doubt about that. There's no way to avoid that. And that weather patterns are among the most complicated things there are. Sort of mathematically, it's sort of impossible to map, really. It's insanely complicated, weather patterns. And that, if anything, the biggest driver of weather is almost certainly the sun, not CO2, which is counted in, I think, a few hundred parts per million. Right? That's the case. Yeah. CO2 is a few hundred parts per million, and is also sort of on a geological time frame at some sort of all-time low or an extreme low. And even if it was much, much higher, well, that would lead to sort of megafauna and megaflora. So it's not even bad if we had much, much higher CO2 levels, all that sort of thing. So, no, I'm not buying that I need to be in prison or fined into penury for having a car that emits CO2. That's my opinion. What do you think? Have I gone too far there?
No, well, I'd say even, the biggest form of man-made climate change, what more than CO2 is geoengineering, which they do. They do geoengineering. But it was interesting. I once listened to Johnny Ball on the Delling Pod, and he made...
Zoe Ball's father.
Yes.
Oh right, okay.
So he got. If you don't know much,
Haven't heard about him in years.
Well, that's the thing. So he was basically cancelled. He was one of the first victims of cancel culture because he went against this climate change nonsense.
Oh wow, okay.
And it is nonsense. And he was one of the things he mentioned on there that really stood out to me was because I'd recently seen a thing. It was on Sky News, Kelsoprese, and they were talking about they had these graphs of all these countries' climate debts, and it was going, as the year would go up, the graphs would go up about each country's carbon debt. And I'd recently seen that, and he was talking about how, you can't create more carbon on this realm of where we live. There is a set amount of carbon. It just changes its properties. Who said so where you have more carbon dioxide, you will have more plant growth. Where you have thinner air, less carbon dioxide, you have less plant growth. But one of the biggest emitters of CO2 is the ocean. So when it gets hot, releases CO2. Yeah. When it gets cold, it absorbs CO2. What we're going to start doing? Taxing the Atlantic, because as everyone knows, you increase the taxes, you will solve climate change. I don't know if you've been on a plane recently.
Yeah.
So when you book the tickets, you can pay a bit more to offset your carbon. I don't see how people cannot see this as nonsense.
Yeah.
Every climate change prediction has never come true.
Yeah. It's mad, isn't it? And it's just a sort of really, really fuzzy thinking to think that you can tax something like that and it will change the climate. Like the idea that if you charge people 15p for a plastic carrier bag, that will sort of solve pollution or something. It's like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, it's the rapper Tom McDonald put it best. He says, we've gone from plastic straws wrapped in paper to paper straws wrapped in plastic.
Right. Yeah. You're just not reasoning correctly if you think that's gonna that's gonna work. That's gonna solve the problem.
It's very much Orwell's 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah, right.
The agreed truth now is it's 5. In fact, it's not even 5 anymore. It's 6, maybe even 7.
Yeah, and don't you dare realise that calculation's wrong. Don't you dare realise. Don't notice.
Trust the science.
Don't notice. Okay, we've got to move on here, unfortunately. I've got so many topics here I'd love to pick your mind about, but we've got to crack on to one. One of the big ones of our time, immigration, both legal and illegal. I know you do a fair bit on this. And I noticed you've dyed your hair. You was telling me just before we started recording, because you're off to Calais soon and you want to sort of blend in.
Yes, so by the time this is aired, we'll have been to Calais.
All right.
I hope you air it after, because we want to go with the element of surprise. Cause it's dangerous for journalists.
Right.
Well, especially those that want to speak the truth, because you get a lot of people that say, "Oh, you can't turn back these refugees, these refugees that are coming over in boats." Now, France is not the nicest of countries anymore, but it's not a war-torn country.
Yeah,
you can't be a refugee from France. But another interesting point is that to get on these boats, it costs thousands of pounds. So the last time I checked, a refugee didn't have a pocket full of cash. It costs thousands of pounds, and even in the summer, literally the smugglers on TikTok, it shows how old I am, don't know how to say it properly. On TikTok, they'll advertise reduced, they basically do a summer deal. Because of the nicer weather, they can get more people across. It's
the people smugglers.
Yes, the smugglers.
Mm.
So we're going to Calais this weekend, as charity workers to just get a good look up close and personal. Because I don't know if you've seen the video. We are the only people in the media that have been in some of the hotels. And from everything I've learned doing the journalism, to me, it screams fraud. Because the amount of money that we're having to pay for all this, and you look around and think, these aren't war-torn people. I saw in one hotel, I saw a couple of women and children. Ironically, it was the Crown Plaza outside Heathrow. Ironically, it was a bit like a castle because they've put this semi-permanent wall that it's literally in a round shape as well around this. Very much like a castle. But you'd think because we want to see who these people are, it would be very much, all right, whilst we've got them in, let's keep them in here so we can process them, see who they are, do they pose a threat? No, it's not to keep them in, it's to keep us out.
Right.
People who have questions out of there. So we basically had to turn up and claim to be electricians.
Right.
So we wore high-vis vests, carried a ladder, electricians, and we were doing a quote on the second floor for the light fittings. Because we wanted to have a good look around here. And again, it's mainly young, healthy men. You go, where's the family? You know, the mainstream media tells us these are families escaping war-torn countries. Well, you look at the people on the dinghies, and quite often, lots of the pictures on the dinghies, it's men. You can literally see gang tattoos, gang insignia or tattooed on their hands.
And they're filming it on their iPhone and whatever.
And they're filming it on their iPhone.
Yeah.
And we're getting more, you know, it was like 6 months ago, Suella Braverman said this is an invasion. Okay, if the Home Sec's going to say that, why aren't we treating it like that? The RNLI has become, you know, the channel Uber. There was a story a couple of months ago where the Navy had to go save some fishermen near Devon because all of Devon's RNLI was in Dover assisting with crossings. That's assisting with crossings.
It's mad, isn't it?
And we've had, you know, the record keeps breaking. Yes. The record keeps breaking each year on how many people come in. And we went down to cover, there was an alleged rape from an Afghan boy. Is he a boy? I don't know. In one of the schools in Dover. So we started doing a bit of research into this. And one of the things, was it Kent? Might have been Kent. Anyway, so the Border Force, if someone, again, I'll find you this article. If the Border Force thinks you don't look over 25 and you say you're a child, they won't question it. So just because I can see you're confused here, just to really wrap your head on that, if they don't look over 25, you know, that's 7 years of legally being an adult in the UK. If you say you're under that, you're a child, they won't question it. And then we had someone who came over here who said they were a child. They ended up murdering a Royal Marine in training in Bournemouth. There was a young lad who was about to sit his GCSEs, got pulled out of school because he was 30. I mean, the guy had a hairy chest, for Christ's sake. Like, I know you get that. Every school's got one kid who's 30 who looks like that tough paper round. But this was clearly a man, and we're facilitating it, and we're paying for it. So back to where I said it was fraud. So there's this one hotel, what was it called? The Atrium, outside Heathrow that we went to look around. And there's over 400 hotels, by the way, that have been chartered by the UK government, i.e. the British taxpayer, i.e. you don't have a say.
There's one no more than 100 metres from where we're sitting.
Is there?
Yeah, just over the road.
Let me get my high-vis and ladder, I'll go.
Yeah. Just quickly to say, that's bloody great work to go in there like that. Like, well done.
Thank you very
brilliant.
much.
No, it's brilliant stuff to go in and do that.
It was.
Sorry, carry on.
You know, some people were like, oh, is it not dangerous? I was like, I don't know, I was having too much fun. It's too exciting. And so, yeah, we're saying that this is fraud because, so not only do they get legal aid, do they get clothing, it's funny, they get their clothing, like they get given clothing, which no doubt, you know, we paid over the odds for through some company that's probably a friend of an MP. They get clothing, they get healthcare, they get 3 square meals a day. A lot of the you can even see on that video that we did, a lot of the food is just left. They don't want it, and but they're all wearing like designer clothing, They've got the latest iPhone. They've got iPhones
Brand
better
new
than I have.
trainers, yeah.
Brand new trainers.
Yeah, the whole lot, yeah.
And not only that, they get a prepaid debit card where they get £40.85 a week. So in this one hotel, if it was at full capacity and no more, which, one of the stories we did, we went to Ireland to cover their immigration stuff. Turns out there was a building that was housing a lot more. It was a repurposed old bank that's housing a lot more than they're legally allowed with their fire safety certificate. Funny enough, actually, they got called out on that through a Freedom of Information request, and they basically said, in layman's terms, we don't care. That the government basically. So if we break fire safety certificates, if we're doing, if we're renting out a house, well, we get in no end of trouble. But when the government do it, it's fine. So yeah, with this hotel, I did the maths, and it worked out about £28,000 per week if you pulled all their money together. That's one hotel. There's over 400, and the number is growing daily.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's probably a low ball. I suspect it's way more than that. It's not just hotels, all sorts of different facilities. The thing that I found most telling is that when suddenly, quite literally, overnight, a couple of the hotels right near us was sort of just requisitioned, for want of a better word, and suddenly full up with fighting age young foreign men from all over the world, it seems, and that there's bouncers on the doors. So the immediate conclusion, I was like, oh, well, that's to stop them from misbehaving or something, or to try and keep the peace inside that hotel or something like that. And it became clear quite quickly, no, it's to stop anyone getting in, asking any questions. That is so telling to me.
Yes.
That is so telling. That says everything you sort of need to know is that this is being forced on you from above, and there's nothing we're not going to let you physically do anything about it. And so here's one of the questions I want to ask. You mentioned Suella Braverman describing it as an invasion. Well, to me, it's obviously a type of invasion. Absolutely, obviously, there's no question about that. But then it comes to the question of, or the point of, how the Tories, the Conservative Party, can be doing this and endlessly gaslight about that they're not capable of doing anything about it, or they're trying really hard to do something about it. And the reason that they're not, the reason why the numbers keep going up, new records are set all the time, is either their incompetence, they're just somehow accidentally failing to do anything about it day after day after day, failing to make the Royal Navy or the RNLI do anything about it. It's just incompetence from their point of view, or that they're not able to, their hands are tied legally by all sorts of treaties and things, all sorts of conventions that they're legally bound by, and that they're accidentally, or it's a case of incompetence, that they're not pulling out of these conventions. None of that makes any sense. If you're the government with a big majority, which they are, they don't need Labour, they don't need a single vote in Parliament from Labour or Lib Dem. They can do it. They've got a big majority, haven't they? And they're just sort of failing to do that due to incompetence. No, it's absolutely deliberate. It's just gaslighting when they're saying that they're going to do something about it. I mean, is that how you feel? Do you think I'm overstating that? How does it make sense otherwise? Really?
No, I think you're bang on, and I think it's... The irony is we're paying millions to France to keep them, we're paying millions to Rwanda to take them, and yet we're getting more and more each year. I'm no mathematician, but to me the numbers and the logic don't add up there. But yeah, it's it's clearly all talk from the government, and that's not just me, Callum Smiles, speaking as just an individual. That's me, Callum Smiles, the journalist that's researched this, that's gone back through all the things they say. I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember when I voted Leave to take back control of our borders.
Right, yeah, I thought that was the idea.
And yet, we're getting more and more now. and I should stress that a lot of people go, oh, you don't want foreigners because you're racist. No, I'd say I used to vote Conservative. I probably won't vote again now. I might just write WEF and tick that just so I'm on the winning side. But a lot of people of Conservative mindset, they're more than happy to help anyone in need. Just don't tell us we have to.
It'd be nice to be asked.
Yes, because most people would. It's in our human nature to help those that need help. But don't say you have to do this and you have to pay for this, because you look at all the things they're saying and you go, oh, we're going to stop this. We're gonna. David Cameron said we're going to limit to it to what 10,000?
Yeah, tens of thousands, I think he said.
That was nearly 15 years ago. And the number goes up, and we voted Leave to stop all this, and we've got people now saying, the Home Sec saying it's an invasion. We're gonna. Or apparently they're now putting signage up, so when they get to Dover, it says that you are breaking the law and you're gonna have to go home. Yet they don't. They go to the processing facilities and they burn down barracks because it's not nice. It's not very nice for them. But an interesting was, so we had that many last year that there was a case where they're like, right, have you got, so bear in mind these undocumented people, because they have to be undocumented, because is it I may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the 1951 UN Asylum Convention? If you turn up to a country without any documentation and say, I'm an asylum seeker, it's not for you to prove you are, it's for the government to prove you're not. So we have all these people which, if I think those numbers are right, and that was who it was, if that is how they're getting here, so they have no documentation, so we don't know who they are, so we should really be doing our utmost to keep them not penned in somewhere because it's inhumane, but penned in because we don't know who you are and what sort of thing you have. I've spoken to a girl in Ireland who was raped by an immigrant who was wanted in Austria and for a previous rape in Ireland of a Canadian girl. He was even convicted in Austria, I think. Yeah, he got there and ended up raping another girl with a false taxi plate. But so these people, the government was saying, well, the border force was saying, if you've got any friends or family you can go stay with whilst you're processed, let us know and we'll travel you there. Because there was that many, they couldn't deal with them. So a lot of them went, oh yeah, I've got friends and family in London. And then there was the police were getting reports about all these people begging for money. They all had the same blanket, the same flip-flops. And that's not a racist term saying it's flip-flops. Literally, the government issued them flip-flops. Just wandering around the streets of London because they'd said, oh, yeah, I've got friends and family there. And they've got there and then they haven't. But, so all these people, which we don't know who they are, we're basically saying, oh, we haven't quite got the manpower to deal with you right now. We'll take you somewhere. Please don't go anywhere or do anything because we don't know who you are yet. How is this not by design?
Yeah, right, yeah. So how sinister is that then? If it's not incompetence from the part of the Tories, then by definition it's what they want. Then how sinister is that? That they want to flood us with unknown people with a high level of criminality. That's simply the fact. It's not racist. It's not bigoted. It's just simply a fact. An invasion of people. What you say about their IDs and things. Well, there's lots of them filming themselves throwing their passports and their IDs in the channel on the way over. Yeah. Doing things like just deliberately destroying it because if there's no country of origin for them to be deported back to. I mean, my line's quite hard. They should all be deported, repatriated, remigrated back to their countries of origin. And if they refuse to give a country of origin, well, then something else needs to be worked out. But they need to go back.
Well,
they need
for me,
to go back.
They must be French. If they're coming from France, they don't have documentation.
I'd love just to drop them on the beaches of Boulogne
why do we have to tow these boats to mainland Britain? It's like, why can't we just tow them back? Let's make this unappealing. Because, okay, you haven't got any documentation. We know you've come from France. Therefore, from everything I can go on, you're French.
Right, yeah. Yeah, short of anything else, you're essentially a Frenchman.
And unless they say, je ne comprends pas, you're going, au revoir.
But isn't that a madness? I think that's why a lot of Tory boys, a lot of boomers, a lot of normies sort of refuse to accept the idea that it's deliberate from the point of the government. It must be incompetence, because if you accept that it isn't incompetence and therefore deliberate, that is so sinister, so worrying, so horrible. I think that that they will turn away. They won't accept it. They'll rather bury their head in the sand than accept that that's true. Well, I refuse to accept. I'm interested in the truth. I'm interested in what's true and real. And if that truth, if that reality is extremely dark and worrying, terrifying, well, so be it. I'd rather that than pretend I don't see. But I think that's a sort of a really important battle for our generation. That's one of our battlegrounds, is making normal people realise what's actually going on.
Well, I think it's a case with a lot of people, they're not ready for it. You know,
Right.
I try and say this to people. You know, I'd go to anti-lockdown marches, and they'd be kind of like, "Oh, what? You should know this. Why aren't you doing this? You know, stop vaccinating people." It's like, okay, you've got the mental capacity to understand that there is a lot of evidence that says your government hates you. A lot of people, especially the boomers, like they grew up with the BBC as a trusted source. You know, why would the news lie to us? As soon as
So
one
naive,
of these
isn't
pillars
it?
comes down,
Yeah.
the whole thing collapses, and it's ultimately. I often compare the stages of waking up to the stages of grief. First, you're angry, you're upset, until eventually, you know, you have to learn acceptance and just moving on with it. I, Callum Smiles, can quite understand. My government hates me and possibly wants to kill me. Okay.
Right.
Well, that, you know,
Yeah.
there's the fact that's not going to change anything, because right now I'm living my life, and you have to just go on enjoying your life. So I think ultimately, just a lot of people, they don't have it in them, because I think a lot of them possibly, they're almost having to push down a thought, you know, the thought that we have openly. I think they're having to push it. Eventually, it will, you know, that thought will take over. But I think they almost just need to have more time to prep, to come to terms with, right, everything you've been told was a lie.
I laughed earlier there, not because it's funny. It's just sort of, what else can you do sometimes? You know, like a nervous laughter, because the future in all sorts of ways looks terribly dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea that the BBC or your own government is actively working against your interests, and that's putting it mildly, is actively against you, wants to grind you down, wants to grind you to nothing, wants you to be silent at the very least, to not to dare to notice, let alone say anything. That seems to be just beyond any doubt, any question at this point.
And obviously the counter to that is, you know, because that is so far a crazy kind of concept, that the counter to that is really loud shouting about this crazy concept. And I get some people that they'll talk about Rebel News. They'll go, like, "You're not going far enough. You're not going far enough." Did you ever watch Ashes to Ashes and Life on Mars?
Yeah. A bit.
So at the end, you realise, if anyone's not watched it, sorry, I'm about to ruin it for you. Maybe turn this off for the next 30 seconds. 'Cause it's a really good series. But at the end, it turns out that Philip Glenister's character, he's actually, because obviously that world they're in, it's just a world where cops who've died, who haven't quite ready to move on, his character's role is to basically just hold their hand and walk people through into the afterlife, those who aren't quite ready to let go. So I have to tell some people about the work we do at Rebel News, because they'll go, you know, "Why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about that?" Because if you get 100 people who can't swim and throw them all in the deep end, a handful will just take to it and they'll adapt. A lot of people will jump straight out the water and they won't want to go near the water again. So our role is to just kind of hold people's hand and start showing them, this doesn't add up. You know, have you ever considered this? Here is their own words. So it's to get people to initially start thinking. Because I've had people, you know, even close friends and family, who thought I was crazy a few years ago. They'll watch some of the reports we do, and they'll go, "Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, it was just explained simply." I've had some people say, "I thought Rebel News were just racists, but actually you're just reporting the story." Like, yeah. That's what we're there to do. We're a halfway point to get people to really start asking. Ultimately, I want my job. I mean, I'd love to have my job forever, but in an ideal world, I wouldn't have to have my job, because everyone could think critically for themselves.
Or the mainstream media would be reporting the truth.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could go on and on about this topic, but unfortunately we've got a limited amount of time, and I've got a whole number of other topics I'd like to talk to you about, and we can't actually cover them all. But one of the things I know you're also interested in, and do a fair bit about is sort of and you touched on it, I think, a little earlier, is the normalisation of paedophilia, for want of a better word. What an unbelievable, what a truly sickening thing that our society is having to deal with something like that. Drag Queen Story Hour. You mentioned something, and all sorts of other things. That's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Drag Queen Story Hour is one of the more milquetoast elements of what's going on. But you mentioned something there. We was talking about how the reaction, when you try and wake some people up, their reaction is quite often just to shout and get angry and call you names. On the paedophilia front, I saw just a clip the other day. It was just a YouTube short where Jon Stewart was talking to somebody or other, another American, about Drag Queen Story Hour. And Jon Stewart was angry. He was swearing, and he was like talking through gritted teeth that how dare you be against Drag Queen Story Hour? Sort of, how dare you want your children not to be sexualised?
Check his hard drive.
Right. I mean, it's sort of unbelievable, isn't it? Like a cry-bully thing. That's not quite the right phrase, but you know where I'm getting at.
Gaslighting,
yeah, gaslighting. Sort of quite very, very aggressive gaslighting. That there's something that's sort of fairly clearly wrong, morally, ethically wrong, and that they will get extremely angry, or the transgender people are sort of famously a little bit violent, for you daring to push back against it. But you're at Rebel News, and you personally, but at Rebel News are doing sort of sterling work on this stuff.
Thank you very much.
So if you want to go ahead and talk to me a little bit about it.
I was when I started doing this, I started seeing the parallels to the whole lockdown thing, because I remember a few years ago I said to my dad, I said that we here in the West we are normalising paedophilia to the point where I think we're going to try and legalise it. And he said, Callum, that is ridiculous. Like, is it? I know you've got some crazy ideas. They keep coming true, by the way. Which I finally got him to start admitting. But I was like, they're going to normalise it. It's similar to the whole lockdown things. Why do they go on so long? Well, because we'll have a generation of kids now. That's all they knew. So all you have to do is, and again with the normalising paedophilia, my theory is you don't have to normalise it to you and me. You have to normalise it to the kids, the impressionable kids, to the point where this is all they know, or this is the only life they've known in which this is normal, or you confuse them enough where, all right, so let's talk about some of the Scottish curriculum reading materials. So when they're talking about sex education, and I don't oppose sex education in terms of the biological sense, Callum, or like, Dad, where does a baby come from? Okay, the woman has the egg, the man has the sperm. This is how, just the biological stuff. But in their reading material, it'll be how the man has sex with the woman. I'm surprised I actually still call them a man and woman. And he puts his penis in and out, and it feels good.
Right, yeah,
so you have that reading material for young children, and, as animals like things that feel good, that make them happy. So imagine how many kids you're going to go, oh, it feels good, does it? Oh, I'm going to explore this further. So maybe they'll ask, the adult that is teaching them this, who I'd be questioning as, what their agenda is. So then they then become vulnerable because they open themselves up to it. And now I'm sure you've, and probably all your readers and listeners have seen, the UN has just said how, those minors should be able to consent. And countries should decriminalise this.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the UN have got a wonderful track record. Stephen Crowder recently did a great thing on his Louder Crowder. They've got a great track record with their sexual crimes with minors. I mean, do we all remember Haiti?
Don't they call it sort of, what do they call it? Sort of
minor attractive persons.
That is so... again, sinister is the word, actually, I think, again. It's sort of unbelievable that we're faced with a world where this is a battleground.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the sex education stuff, that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. It's way more subversive and perverse than that in all sorts of ways, isn't it? Like teaching them about transgenderism and homosexuality and all sorts of things.
Yes.
And just all sorts of just weird sex stuff. Or just like, there's no reason why a little kid needs to know anything about sort of even Oral sex, for example, just that. They don't need to
there
know
are now-
about that
which
when
there
you're
are now teaching materials.
when in your primary school. You don't. That's that's adult stuff. I also agree that at some point sex education is necessary, but when it's wantonly perverse, though,
Yes, and it is becoming that. Well,
it is grooming. It's a
between the
type of
ages
grooming.
4 and 6. So in Wales, they've changed their curriculum, and the funny thing is, there's no parental opt-out. So, but between the age of 4 and 6, they talk about pleasuring themselves. And funny enough, when you again, I'll send you this document. When they talk about where they get these things from, so some of their resources come from the Kinsey Institute. Are you aware of Alfred Kinsey?
I've heard the name.
Alfred Kinsey, John Money.
Oh yeah, John Money. Yeah, no.
Yes, they basically
know all about John Money.
From what I have seen, they basically created the whole transgenderism stuff. It was some sick experiment, and you look at some of
John Money's a true monster. Yeah.
So's Alfred Kinsey. I mean, they are both awful people, and their experiments basically resulted in the death of all these children. They all end up dying, and you talk about a lot. We're now fortunately starting to see some previous trans people talking about detransitioning, which unfortunately isn't getting enough mainstream attention, because most people, when they fully transition, it's a thing they often will grow out of, but then they're depressed because
It's
crap,
too late. Yeah.
turns out I've done this. But there's a lot of evidence out there that actually shows that there's a lot of chemicals that we ingest. So atrazine that's got into some water supplies, drinking water.
They're not turning the frogs gay, are they?
Well, Alex Jones was bang on. It turns out I saw this thing actually. I need to check.
When
out
was
more.
Alex Jones ever wrong? Let's be honest.
And it said about how 20% of all sea life now is apparently androgynous. So there's another chemical, glyphosate, which was this. They said this was this really safe pesticide that we're gonna use it for our GMO food, and that was getting into water supplies. That was changing the biology of living organisms to become more androgynous, and a lot of actually crops would get sprayed with that to make more crops. They'd spray it towards the end because what it does is it then kills off the crop, and the crop, like any parent would do, they do everything for their children. So literally, as the crop would die, to accelerate the growth of these GMO crops, it would put all of its remaining energy into the crop, so then it could be harvested quicker. And then there's a book called Brighton Baby that I was reading. It's a massive book. It's like 28 quid, but oh my God, well worth the read. Or even if you just pick it up and just go through different chapters. And it talks about how, I despise makeup. Personally, I actually think women are more attractive without it. And the way I see it is, if you're attractive, right, don't ruin a masterpiece. If you're not, you're selling a lie. But the comedy out of the way, it's toxic. It's toxic, full of toxic chemicals. Things like titanium dioxide is in most of them. Skittles got sued because that was causing cancer in people. But there's a lot of chemicals in makeup where when women are pregnant, the chemicals, so the biggest absorber of the body is your skin. You absorb most things through your skin. And there's lots of evidence that shows it makes the fetus more androgynous. And you just have to look at how much people are wearing these days, all these new sorts of makeups, all these new chemicals we're exposed to, and look at modern society these days. For me, 2 + 2 there is equaling 4, not 5.
Yeah, again, another worrying thing. I'm gonna have
Sorry about these tangents.
No, yeah.
Because I just
I'm gonna have to, unfortunately, just because of pure time constraints, start drawing it to a close. And I've got a number of topics here. I wanted to ask you about sort of Scotland, what's going on in Scotland, Ukraine. Probably not going to get to that, but we'll leave it on this. I would like to get your opinion on just sort of what's going on in America, because Biden has just recently. I know it's Rebel UK you work for, but nonetheless, I absolutely value your opinion. Where Biden has recently said he's going to run for re-election again, so he'd be 85, 86 by the end of his second term if he did that. And he's already, in my mind, a clear case well, he's geriatric, isn't he? And whether you think Trump or DeSantis who might win that ticket, and whether we're looking at a Trump or DeSantis versus Biden campaign next, and what are all your thoughts and feelings on that?
Go back a few years, I'd say Trump would definitely get it, but that was when I actually believed that. Okay, I was like, yeah, this has been rigged. You know,
He said he was going to drain the swamp. He didn't really drain the swamp, did he?
I'd maybe argue he's lowered the water
marginally.
But then you look at, you could maybe argue that the work he's done has really exposed a lot of us. You know, maybe it's not for him to drain, but for him to show us how much needs draining, and then we collectively come and drain it together.
Thanks.
Everyone bring your bucket. We're draining this swamp.
Yeah.
But so with Biden, a very interesting question that often gets posed to me is that Joe Biden?
I've heard that. Yeah, he's wearing a mask. Look at the loose skin around his neck. It's a mask.
Look at the loose skin around the neck. Look at the ears.
I don't know. Whoever it is doing a very good impression of someone suffering from early stage Alzheimer's or something. Even like his doddery little walk. It's not normal, let alone all his verbal gaffes.
Yeah, it's very much
falling
a
over.
Walk.
Yeah,
the shuffling of her feet.
Dementia, I think, fairly clearly in my mind. And I don't want to be needlessly rude. I'm not doing this to try and score points, to try and dunk on the Democrats. It just seems to be factually the case he's got dementia. I mean,
10% for the big guy and then put the big guy in a home.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, the big guy who will read anything we put on the teleprompter for him. Read it poorly, actually.
Yeah, it is. You know, I think when you come to think that it's just theatre, just enjoy the ride, enjoy the memes, enjoy the laughs.
Right, yeah, you've not got much more choice, have we, really?
Yeah, if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah, yeah. So would you rather Trump or DeSantis, would you rather see? If you had to pick, if it is just between those two?
I was always a big fan of Trump, especially with, the amount he did against child trafficking.
Yeah, yeah.
And I one thing that does worry me is that I saw that video where George Soros was almost kind of endorsing DeSantis.
Oh, really?
Was that like a double bluff where it's like, oh, let's make them think that because I'm endorsing him, they won't want him then? Or is it a bit concerning?
I was quite dismissive of Trump just then, but I would say that I did see a clip. Of course, he's way, way better than whatever the other side put forward, of course, obviously. And he did do some important things, genuinely important things. Right, yeah, stuff like that. That's this is a major understatement. That's not to be sniffed at. That's sort of amazing. He did a few
especially for an American,
sort of fairly amazing things he did do. And I did see him say very recently, that if he was re-elected, he would sort of be people's retribution. I think I'm pretty sure he used that word. I will be your retribution against the deep state. He wasn't saying, "I'll drain the swamp." He was saying, "I'll dismantle the deep state." If he did that, or even if he did a fraction of it, really, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. So we'll see. It's a shame that Trump and DeSantis aren't sort of on the same page. If it couldn't be a Trump-DeSantis ticket, that might be nice. But it doesn't
in 4 years and then give that guy 8 years.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that is on the cards. But nonetheless, again, I wanted to ask you about Tucker and Don Lemon and all sorts of things. But
Tucker.
yeah, it's a shame. It looks like now, when this is being recorded, it looks in the last couple of days, he was fired. He didn't walk away from them. They fired him.
They Bud Lighted themselves.
Right, yeah. Because he could go on. I saw Jeremy from the Quartering say Tucker could go on, do his own thing, and be as big as Joe Rogan.
Or whatever,
Crowder, he could be completely massive entirely on his own.
People didn't watch him because they watched Fox News. They watched Fox News because they watched him.
I like Tucker.
Yeah,
some of his takes have proved to be wrong, and I don't agree with everything he says and all of his
worldview. Like
but a lot of it is
he
great.
Admits when he's wrong.
He's brave. He's brave. Right?
Yes, he will put his neck.
Takes are brave.
He puts his neck above the parapet. But more importantly, I've seen him when he's been wrong. He's gone, I was wrong about that.
Right? Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We're not going to get everything right.
Yeah.
But he takes a big man to say, "You're right. I was wrong."
Just on the JFK thing, which I've always been fascinated with my whole life, just came out and said, yeah, it looks like the CIA did that, on Fox News, just saying it to the camera.
Yeah.
That's brave as hell, really.
I'd vote for any man that got rid of every single 3-letter agency and organisation in the world.
Yeah, I don't think he's got any intention of running, but if he did, he'd probably do very well.
I mean,
I would have thought.
a Trump Tucker
Yeah,
ticket
that would be sweet. Yeah, that would be sweet. That'd be really good. Callum, unfortunately, we do have to bring it to a close there, but it's been a pleasure to have a conversation with you,
Pleasure's
and maybe we can have you back sometime, because there was lots didn't get to pick your brain about, and in the intervening months, I'm sure there'll be so many more events that we can talk about, or go into some of these in greater detail. Because I know you do know about them in great detail. But if there's anything you want to, well, please do plug.
Yeah.
Before we round it off.
Well, I mean, if you are interested in all the stuff I used to, frankly speaking, politics, but I do the convincing otherwise, you can find that on Instagram and Rumble. I stopped doing YouTube because I kept getting strikes. Ironically, I'd get a strike a year later for things.
Yeah.
All because, YouTube moved the goalposts.
They move the goalposts and then apply it retrospectively. Like that's so unfair. That's so unfair.
But if if you're interested in what we do at Rebel News, that's kind of why I'm here today. Rebel News UK on YouTube, and obviously there is the website Rebel News, where we are covering all things 15-minute city, the migration stuff. As you'll see by the time this is out, we've just been to Calais. Hopefully I come back in one piece. But yeah, if there's one particular video I go to, I'd say the migrant Heathrow Hotel, like that. I had people that didn't even know I'd do this job, that they went, "Oh, I've just seen you on TikTok." I was talking about, and they showed me this thing. People were downloading the full video, putting it on their own TikTok, and again, going back to the whole, I'll keep it very brief. Going back to the whole, like, what Rebel do is we like just trying to guide people in. I had people. We did exactly that with that video. I had people going, "Oh my God, is this really happening? How long has this been going on for? What happens next?" So that's the one go-to video I'd say go to. But yeah, cool. Rebel News UK, mainly on YouTube.
No, it's important work. We get the same at Lotus Seaters. People say, "Why aren't you going harder on this? Why aren't you doing this angle and that angle?"
It's all about perception.
Right, yeah.
If you sound and look crazy, unfortunately, people will think you're crazy, even if you are right. Alex Jones may have done a lot more good work earlier on and sooner. Had he seen? I mean, I love the whole. I think it's hilarious. but a lot of your normies, he sounds crazy, and unfortunately, it's taken him to be right on a lot of things to just get a portion of society saying, "Oh, he's right." You've still got people now going, "Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist."
It's really important. I would argue. I genuinely do think that one of the most important battlegrounds, for want of a better word, is opening those doors, opening those gates for people to realise, rather than just bombarding them with despair.
You want to get people to think for themselves again, which we've outsourced our thinking.
So Rebel News and Lotus Seaters, hopefully a little bit of cross-pollination there for everybody. So long may it last.
Hopefully.
Okay, until next time, everyone. Take care. See you soon.